The American Public Bathhouse, Kraków, Poland, early 1920s.
This photograph was taken in Kraków, most likely around 1921 or 1922. What we see is a rebuilt bathhouse, identified by the large Polish inscription across the façade, Amerykańska Łanźnia Ludowa, the American Public Bathhouse. This image belongs to the wider story of Jewish reconstruction after the First World War. But before we move into that larger history, it is worth staying with the photograph itself, because this building already tells us what kind of story this is. Not a story of spectacle, not a story of grand architecture, but a story of ordinary institutions returning to life.
Chapter 1. First Look.
At first glance, the image feels almost severe. A plain building stands in open view. A few people gather in front of it. Others pass by in blurred motion. The ground looks uneven, with traces of snow or slush still visible. A street lamp rises near the right side of the frame. Nothing here feels ceremonial. Nothing is staged for grandeur. And that matters, because the photograph does not present this place as a monument. It presents it as something usable, a working place, a place meant to serve. Even the people in front of the facade seem to confirm that. Some stand still. Others move quickly enough to blur. This is not a crowd admiring a building. It is a place re-entering ordinary life.
Chapter 2. 3 words on the wall.
The key to the whole photograph is written directly across the facade. Amerykańska Łanźnia Ludowa. 3 words, and each of them matters. The first is American. That word is not decorative. It points to a specific source of support. This bathhouse was rebuilt in the wider context of post-war Jewish reconstruction, and the image comes from the archive of the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, or JDC, the major American Jewish relief organization founded during the First World War. JDC helped sustain and rebuild devastated Jewish communities across Eastern Europe. So the word American does more than suggest help from abroad. It makes the source of that help visible on the facade itself. The second word is bathhouse. That brings us back to the practical. This was not a symbolic institution. It was tied to hygiene, bodily care, and the material rhythms of daily life. And the third word is public. That may be the most revealing word of all, because it suggests not a private refuge and not an elite institution, but a place intended to serve broadly. Taken together, these 3 words turn a plain facade into a historical statement: American support, Jewish communal rebuilding, and an institution meant to function again in the street.
Chapter 3. A building meant to work.
The building is striking precisely because it is not striking in the usual sense. It is not ornate. It does not announce prestige. Its facade is plain, its lines are simple, its proportions feel practical rather than ceremonial. This is architecture shaped not by abundance, but by necessity. That is important, because post-war reconstruction often leaves exactly this kind of trace: not grandeur, but repair; not display, but reuse; not an idealized beginning, but a return to function under difficult conditions. The building stands again not because it is beautiful, but because it is needed. And that modesty is not incidental. It is part of the meaning of the image.
Chapter 4. After the war.
According to the archival description, this was a rebuilt Jewish bathhouse, making use of an older ritual bath structure that had been left in ruins during the war. That detail matters. But what the photograph shows most clearly is not ritual life in any narrow sense. It shows the rebuilding of communal infrastructure. A bathhouse in Jewish urban life could carry more than one meaning at once. It belonged to the practical organization of a community, but it could also remain connected to older religious and communal forms. What seems to matter here is that an older institution, damaged and interrupted by war, was made usable again. So this is not simply a photograph of a building. It is a photograph of continuity under altered conditions. Something older survives here, but it survives in a changed world.
Chapter 5. When aid becomes local.
The word American is not decorative. It points to a larger history behind the building. After the First World War, Jewish communities across Eastern Europe faced devastation on several levels at once. Poverty, displacement, illness, damaged institutions, and the collapse of many older forms of livelihood. In that setting, help from abroad mattered most when it became concrete. A school, a clinic, a kitchen, a bathhouse. That is what makes this image so strong. It does not show aid as an abstract idea. It shows aid after it has become local, material, and ordinary. The support may have come from abroad, but the building stands here, on this street, in Polish, serving a local community. That tension is built into the image itself.
Chapter 6. The smaller signs.
The large inscription dominates the facade, but the smaller signs are just as revealing. On the left, we see Wchód do łaźni, the entrance to the bathhouse. On the right, another sign points do stróża, to the caretaker. These details matter because they reduce the whole story to the scale of use. This is not only a named institution, it is an organized one. There is an entrance, there is supervision, there is movement through the building, there is someone responsible for the place. These are tiny signs, but they bring the photograph down to the level where communal life actually happens, through doors, directions, routines, and roles.
Chapter 7. The people in front.
The figures in the image are small. None of them can be described with confidence as individuals, but they still matter. Their scale reminds us that the building is the true center of the frame. At the same time, their presence keeps the photograph from becoming an empty architectural study. A few stand still, others blur as they pass. That blur is important. It suggests use rather than ceremony, traffic rather than performance. A place with a function, not simply a structure being documented for its own sake. The photograph may have been taken to record reconstruction, but it also captures something more elusive, the return of normal movement around a communal institution. And in a post-war setting, that kind of normality is not a small thing.
Chapter 8. What this building holds.
What makes this image especially powerful is its scale. It does not try to summarize the whole condition of Jewish Krakow after the war. It gives us something smaller: a wall, a sign, a building restored to use, a few people in front of it, a muddy or wintry street, a caretaker somewhere nearby. That scale is worth noticing, because history often reaches us first as abstraction: war, devastation, relief, recovery. But photographs like this work differently. They show how those large processes become visible in one local institution. This is reconstruction at street level. And perhaps that is why the image feels so quiet. It does not need to dramatize the story. The story is already there, in the fact that the place stands again.
Chapter 9. Standing again.
So this photograph gives us more than a building in Krakow. It gives us a Jewish communal institution rebuilt after war. A façade in Polish marked by the word American. A place where relief becomes infrastructure, and infrastructure becomes part of ordinary life again. Nothing here is visually grand. That is precisely the point. This is what rebuilding can look like when it leaves the language of politics and enters the language of the street. Not triumph, not spectacle, just a bathhouse standing again and ready to serve.
Chapter 10. The final clue.
There is one more clue in the photograph, a tiny one. When the image is enlarged, part of the inscription becomes readable: Ulica Szeroka. That changes everything, because it leads us to Szeroka Street, in the heart of Jewish Kazimierz. And there, at number 6, the building still survives as Krakow's great Mikveh. So this is not only a photograph of a vanished place, it is also a photograph of a place that endured. The function changed, the signs changed, but the building remained. And that is the final surprise hidden in the image.
If this small fragment of the past spoke to you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel.